Whiskey versus bourbon versus Scotch, NYC Bartender explains like a pro. Imagine walking into a stylish New York City bar. The lights are low, jazz is playing softly, and behind the counter, a bartender with years of experience looks at you and asks the question most people fear: what are you drinking tonight? For many, the panic is real, because whiskey is a world of its own. Bourbon, Scotch, Irish, rye, it feels confusing. So today, I'm going to break it all down like a true NYC bartender, simple, confident, and professional, so that next time you walk into any bar, you'll order like a pro. Let's start with the basics. All bourbon is whiskey. All Scotch is whiskey. But not all whiskey is bourbon or Scotch. Think of whiskey like a big family. Bourbon and Scotch are like two different cousins, each with their own personality, rules, and flavor. So what exactly is whiskey? Whiskey is an alcoholic spirit made from fermented grain and aged in wooden barrels. That grain can be corn, barley, rye, wheat, or a mix of them. But here's where things get interesting. Depending on the country, the grain, the barrels, and the process, the whiskey changes dramatically. Now let's talk bourbon. If whiskey had a sweet, friendly, all-American cousin, that's bourbon. Legally, bourbon must be made in the United States, and the mash must contain at least 51% corn. Corn gives bourbon its signature sweetness. Bourbon must also be aged in brand new charred oak barrels. These fresh barrels are like flavor bombs. They push out vanilla, caramel, brown sugar, and sometimes even buttery notes. That's why when you sip a bourbon like Maker's Mark, Buffalo Trace, or Woodford Reserve, you feel that warm, rich, dessert-like sweetness. Bourbon is smooth, approachable, and it's the easiest whiskey for beginners. In NYC bars, bourbon is the go-to choice for old fashions, Manhattans, and whiskey sours. It's bold, but soft around the edges, just like New York's best bartenders. Now let's shift across the ocean, to the rugged highlands of Scotland. Scotch is whiskey made in Scotland, that's the law. But Scotch is mostly made from malted barley, not corn. And unlike bourbon, Scotch is aged in used barrels, often old bourbon barrels or sherry casks. This gives Scotch deeper, earthier, sometimes fruitier flavors. There are many types of Scotch: Highland, Lowland, Speyside, Islay, and each region has its own personality. If bourbon is sweet and friendly, Scotch is sophisticated, complex, and full of character. Take Speyside Scotch, for example, Glenfiddich or the Macallan. Smooth, elegant, slightly sweet, with hints of honey and dried fruit. Then you've got Islay Scotch, the smoky beasts. Laphroaig, Ardbeg, Lagavulin. These are intense, smoky, peaty, ocean salt monsters. If bourbon tastes like a dessert, Islay Scotch tastes like a campfire by the sea. That's why Scotch drinkers are often passionate, loyal, and very serious about their whiskey, and yes, in Scotland, it's spelled whiskey, no e. Now, let's compare them side by side, bartender style. If you want sweetness, go bourbon. If you want a smoke, go Islay Scotch. If you want smooth and elegant, go Speyside Scotch. If you want something classic and American, bourbon is king. If you want something deep and layered, Scotch delivers complexity. But what about whiskey in general? Whiskey is simply the umbrella term. It includes bourbon, Scotch, rye whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Irish whiskey, Tennessee whiskey. The list goes on. Think of it like coffee. You have espresso, latte, cappuccino, but at its core, it's all coffee. Whiskey works the same way. Here's something many people don't know. Bourbon is never smoky, because of the corn in the new barrels. Scotch can range from delicate to aggressively smoky, depending on the region and the use of peat in drying the barley. That's why the flavors are so different, even though both drinks are technically whiskey. Let's talk about cocktails. If a customer at a New York bar wants something sweet and smooth, I reach for bourbon. Old-fashioned? Bourbon. Whiskey sour? Bourbon. Manhattan? Traditionally rye. But bourbon works if you want it sweeter. For Scotch, it's different. In NYC, Scotch is usually enjoyed neat or on the rocks. Some classics like the Penicillin or Rob Roy use Scotch beautifully, but the spirit shines best solo. Scotch is like jazz music. You don't remix it too much. You let it play. Now let's talk price. People often ask, why is Scotch so expensive compared to bourbon? Simple. Scotch takes longer to make. It's often aged in expensive sherry casks. The weather in Scotland is colder, so aging is slower. Plus, Scotch distilleries have centuries of tradition, and you're paying for that history. Bourbon, on the other hand, ages faster in the hot Kentucky climate. New barrels are cheaper than sherry casks. And there's a huge supply in the US, so bourbon tends to be more affordable, but you can still find premium bottles that cost thousands of dollars. Here's a pro tip from NYC bartenders. If you want a whiskey that is easy to drink, choose bourbon. If you want a whiskey that makes you think, choose Scotch. Both are amazing. Both are whiskey. Just different personalities. And finally, let's talk about how to order like a pro. Don't walk into a bar and say, "Give me whiskey." That tells the bartender nothing. Instead, say what style you like. If you want sweet, say, "I'm looking for something bourbon forward." If you want smooth, say, "Got anything like a Speyside Scotch?" If you want smoky, say, "I'd like a Peaty Isla Scotch." If you say that in a New York City bar, the bartender will instantly know you're not a beginner. Whiskey is not just a drink. It's culture. It's history. It's craftsmanship. And once you understand the difference between bourbon and Scotch, you unlock a whole new world of flavor. So next time you walk into a bar, whether it's in Manhattan, Brooklyn, or Queens, you'll know exactly what to order, why it tastes that way, and how to enjoy it like a true whiskey lover. And that's the NYC Bartender Breakdown. Simple, clean, confident, and straight to the point.